Hey, what's up? You're here today with Nick the Informative Fisherman, and today we're going to be discussing bank fishing tips part 1. Now, first things first, when you get out there and you're getting everything going, it's always about what you forgot at home. So let's go over what you need to bring with you when you go on bank fishing, the important things. And you got to remember, it's crucial. What you do before you go could cause you to catch the fish, miss the fish, have the wrong equipment with you, or forget something random that you really needed to bring. And you're going to go out there and blow 8 hours when you come home and you're like, oh, you know what, I could have got them if I would have had this. So let's go over what we need. First things first, bait. Okay, we all need bait. So we got to know the bait in our area. What type of bait naturally swims around there? Do the catfish that we're going for, or do another type of fish go after bluegill or mudsuckers or whatever is the natural food source in your area? You need to understand, because more than likely that's what most fish species over there are feeding on. Say for example, like I was saying with the bluegill, say if they feed on bluegill, then you generally want to use bluegill. But there are exceptions to the rule. Everybody knows the night crawlers or chicken livers. So let's just say you got your bait picked out, you know what they're feeding on the area, so you need to bring your bait box right there and have some ice pack in there, keep your bait fresh, keep it cool. So you got that part covered. Now from there, with your bait, you're going to need a good bait knife. Always bring a nice little bait knife with you, or a pocket knife. Just make sure you have it, because if you're having to rip your bait apart with your hands, it's going to make for a messy day. So have your bait knife, a little 3 or 5 gallon bucket, whatever you want to bring with you. We're going to add that to the bucket. From there, the next tool is needle nose pliers. There's always a fish that gets hooked in some random spot, and you always need the pliers to get it out. If you forget the pliers, you're going to have a real tough time. Remember, needle nose pliers. From there, you're dealing with the bait a lot. You're getting your hands real messy. You're taking fish off the hook. You're cutting up bait. You don't want to make your nice equipment real slimy. You don't want to have your hands caked with bait the whole time. So what you can do is you can dip a little rag out into the water, rub that bait off your hands. Once you throw a fish back in, clean them back off your hands. Next thing, you want to have a bait rag. Get the junk off your hands. From there, let's talk about tackle. Let's say you wanted to use a sliding rig that day, or whatever rig you choose to use at that spot that you're going to be fishing from on the bank. You're going to want to bring an extra set of tackle. I know a million guys that go out and they only bring one thing of each. Say they got 2 rods with their setups, and once they get snagged up and break one rig off, then they're out that rod the rest of the time. Why waste your time of even making that trip unless you're going to become successful when you're there? So you want to be prepared ahead of time. So always bring a little tackle box. You don't have to bring all your gear. Just bring a little something, with your supplies in there, your weights, an extra slider, a big snap swivel, just regular swivels to get your stuff back there, extra hooks. And when I'm bank fishing, the hooks I always use are circle hooks. Why? Why do I use a circle hook? Well, if you don't know how to use a circle hook, you gradually pull and you begin to retrieve as the fish is biting this. And why this is so beneficial for bait fishing is, say you cast out there and your bait's sitting right there in that little bottom spot, and you're waiting an hour for a bite, and the fish finally moves in and he starts biting it. Now you could start to reel, and the circle hook's designed to slide over into the corner of his mouth and get him. But if you don't feel like you hooked up with that fish, you can gradually let your bait go right back down to the bottom and give that fish a second chance to bite it. Versus if you're using a standard J hook, you set that hook, you miss, potentially you could have ripped your bait off of your hook, or you pulled it way out of that strike zone so the fish doesn't get another chance. Circle hooks. Okay, now when you're going out to your area that you're fishing, what would you just discuss to have a little backup tackle here? Now your weights are crucial. If you have current, you're going to have to use heavier weights, 3, 4 ounce, 5 ounce, 6 ounce, whatever it's going to take to keep it down on the bottom. If you have a hard rocky bottom, you don't want to use pyramid weights like this here, because this can get lodged in between. You might want to use a round weight, something that can slip around rocks easier. If you're using a muddier bottom, if you're fishing a muddier bottom, then using a round weight would slide, and that's where you would need to use a pyramid weight. If you're wanting your bait to roll across the bottom, which most bank fishermen never do, you can use that ball weight. So that's your choice. I like to bring line conditioner to spray my reels down, spray the line down. It helps over time, prevents a little line memory in there, and helps you cast a little bit better. Now when it comes to nets, I like to use a very large net. I have a big striper net here, and the handles on it is about 4 foot long. Now the reason why I use a long net, say if I'm fishing on the bank and I know 4 foot out there, it's 2 foot deep. And say I get a big striper or any large fish species and I bring him up, and once he's on the bottom he's going to start flipping around and I can't get my hands on him. That fish could potentially throw the hook, get back out in the water. So I want to have a long net that I can get out there with, put it down, and I can land that fish while he's out there in a decent amount of water and not trying to throw my hook. So long net, big net, crucial. Okay, you want to have a little line, a little spare line. Let's say you broke off, you have to retie that rig. You got all your little tackle pieces there, but you don't have your line. I always carry my spooling box with me. Sure, it may be a lot of things to carry, but you know what? If you go unprepared, be prepared not to catch fish. That's just how it goes. You want to understand your bottom when you go to a place. You're going to be bank fishing out there. You're fishing one area. You want to do everything you can to possibly increase your odds. If you don't know what a marker float is, I've already made a video on the marker float, and what it's designed for is you cast these guys out, you release the line, you can feel the bottom, you know what the bottom feels like, you can feel where drop-offs are, but please see my video how to use a marker float, and this is a very simplified one that I made right here that I have a video on, so go check it out. Now, a lot of mistakes that I see when guys are bank fishing, they cast their line out there and they sit it down, you know, they're drinking beer, having a good time. Don't get me wrong, I love to do it myself. But it leads to a lot of missed fish. The fish is biting, you don't get there in time to get the hooks on them, you know, you miss the set, and that fish gets off and you just wasted a couple hours. But if you're having a good time, no big deal, right? But I like to catch the fish. So, once I make my cast out there, woo, cast it out, right? I like to keep the rod in my hand. I'll park it up under my elbow and set it on my hip, you know, and just relax there. Now, by holding the rod, you wait to feel the pumping of the fish, and if you got a bigger rod, you may not be able to feel that sensitive bite. So what I like to do is called the trigger hold, which is something my father taught me when I was real young, and placing my index finger on the line while I'm sitting there, you feel that initial little thud before your rod ever moves, and that gives you a heads up of, hey, this fish could potentially take it, I'm ready, I am now prepared, I have a heads up, I have a little advantage on that fish that I did not have before. Another mistake I see guys make, they cast out there, they have a big bow in their line, a ton of slack. That fish is going to bite it. That bow is going to come out, and maybe he didn't pull it far enough so you even had the feel. Even if I was using this little trigger hold right here, I might not have felt it because there's so much slack line. Woo, woo. I'm just, you know, swinging into the wind. I'm not hooking up with anything there. So it's good to have a little bit of tension between your rig and your rod. So when I do have my finger on there, it's an immediate response. You know, you get that immediate response. It's not a bad thing to leave it a little bit slack, but you want to be able to feel that fish bite. So that's absolutely crucial. Now with the circle hook, when you're fishing from the bank, you don't set the hook. That's not what they're designed to do, which is great, and this is why I use the circle hooks from the bank, because like I said, you cast out there, when the fish starts to bite, you want to keep your rod tip down. You don't want to set the hook vertically on the fish. You want the fish to start to move, and you want that hook to pull away to where it's going to slide over into the corner of the fish's mouth. So you can gradually move the rod back to where you feel the weight of the fish and start to reel real slow. And as soon as you feel the weight of the fish, increase your reel speed, and that will pull that barb through the fish's mouth. Okay, now there's another mistake that can take place at that time. Let's say you were working on your reel, you were lubing it up and cleaning it, and your drag was too loose. Guess what happens when you start to put the hook on the fish at that point? It's so loose, the barb never penetrates. So you just blew an hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever it took to get that bite, and your drag was too loose. And now the fish shakes the hook, he runs off. Bad day, right? So check your equipment ahead of time. You want to make sure your drag's set to a decent amount to where you know that hook can penetrate him, and if it's a big fish and he runs off, he's not going to snap your line. So get used to utilizing your drag. I'm your host, Nick the Informative Fisherman, and we'll see you next time.